Influence, a premier video show where we share the success journeys of the elite and learn about the pivotal moments and decisions that shaped their paths to prominence. I'm your host, Nancy Erickson. I work with high net worth individuals, CEOs, and business leaders, and I give them a white glove, really hands on experience to write, edit, publish, market, and distribute their books worldwide. I'm the owner of Stonebrook Publishing, an award winning publishing house that publishes nonfiction works. Today, my esteemed guest is Duncan Grossart. Duncan is a proven commercial and environmental entrepreneur with long and successful track record. His primary interests are in travel, digital media and publishing, technology, and deployment of capital, particularly within nature conservation, rewilding the environment, sustainability, health, and well-being. He is a values-driven business person, and he is the founder of Journeys with Purpose, which he's going to tell us about. So, Duncan, welcome. How are you today?
I'm very well, Nancy. Thank you very much indeed. It's a pleasure to be
Okay.
here.
So we can tell by your accent that you're not from St. Louis, Missouri, like me. So where are you located?
So yes, I'm British. I'm based here and speaking with you from the southeast of England, about an hour south of London, not too far from an area in the UK called the South Downs, which is our newest national park and a very lovely area of the UK.
Well, how interesting that you live on the borders of a national park. That's perfect place for you, given what you do. So before we get into Journeys with Purpose, tell us a little about your growing up years. Where are you originally from? What was your family life like? Give us the boyhood.
Well, I grew up near where I live now. So I talked with you about this area of the southeast of England, the South Downs, and I'm really a country boy at heart. I grew up in the countryside. I grew up with animals around me, and in particular horses as well. So these were kind of part of my shaping and formative experiences as I was growing up. I was also lucky enough to begin to travel long haul from a relatively early age in my mid-teens, back in the mid-80s. When I first went to Africa, I also then traveled to India and again to Africa in my teens. So I had that experience growing up of being surrounded by animals, traveling in my teens. I also then studied zoology at university in London, and I also did a master's degree in equine science as well in Ireland. So those were very much my kind of shaping years, and also watching David Attenborough on television, Jacques Cousteau on television, and so on, and that sort of wonderful doors being opened about the natural world outside of the UK.
So you're very interested in animal husbandry, I guess I would call it. That's what we call it here in the States.
Mhm.
What did you have pets when you were a child? I mean,
I
you talked
did.
about you had
I
horses and
did.
stuff. So tell me a little bit about what your relationships were like with the animals.
I think it was very much around a care for animals. We didn't have any exotic animals. They were generally smaller based animals, fowl, bantams and ducks and chickens and so on, and dogs.
Mhm.
And we did have some tortoises as well. So when you're dealing with smaller animals, apart from the horses,
Right.
you're generally, you're dealing with smaller creatures. You're dealing with vulnerable creatures, and
Yes.
therefore, I think that gives you an absolutely instinctive and intuitive guide as to how to care for other sentient life. And I do believe in the theme of life being sentient.
Mhm. So, like, when you traveled, like you said, to India and such as a
Mm.
teenager, they have different animals there than you do in England, right?
Oh, they did.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. I remember, and they still have them, the cows in the streets and so on. And I thought India was just incredible. Very different from the experience that I grew up with in the UK. And they obviously have their wide array of wildlife as well, including the iconic tiger, which I did see in later years in the wild.
Oh, really?
And that again was really helping to inform me about wildlife, but also about different cultures as well, and people, and
Mhm.
how people lived around the world, and how they may live different culturally, but some of the same aspects of how we all live shine through.
Of course. So when you got out of university and then you did a master's degree, did you say in equine science?
Yes, I did.
What
Yeah.
did you do next?
Okay. Well, then once I'd finished my academic career, I then embarked on my commercial career, and that's been really of two parts. The first part was a purely commercial career, and I went to London. I worked for a couple of companies, and then I had my own media and photography agency that became quite successful.
Mm-hmm.
We had offices in London, in Europe, and then America, and we had a series of international partners all over the world. And I really enjoyed photography and made it a success because I'm generally more visually orientated. I'm reasonably dyslexic, so I find text more difficult. And I love working with pictures and visuals and so on, and storytelling. And that
Yes.
we'll come back to that, with what I do now. But,
Yeah, so let me just jump in for a second.
Yeah.
So what kind of photography did you do? Was it portrait photography, animal photography, landscape?
Well, it was a whole wider range. It was commercial photography for
Okay.
advertising purposes.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So
I was going to say my husband is retired, but he's a photographer, and he does he goes around excuse me, all around the world to do landscape photography. So that's that's his, in fact, he just got home from a trip on Sunday, so he's
Well, I'd love to hear more about this, Nancy. Now or at a later occasion. But I adore photography and all types of photography, through from commercial photography to fine art photography to reportage and so on. And I think again that was, some of my early memories, how I grew up in the 70s, was seeing these particularly sort of reportage images coming through the television, and that sort of affected me. I think about an interest in different cultures and events around the world. And so it was commercial photography that led me on a journey of understanding how businesses work. I'd always been interested in business, and that's why I went to London. And also then how to organize and scale teams of people. So not being a business graduate, I then put myself on courses, business courses in the UK and also the US. I spent some time at MIT in Boston.
Well, that's a
really
feather in your cap.
Well, it was a wonderful experience, and I also joined some business networks as well. And the most significant one that I remain in now is Young Presidents Organization, or YPO. So I'm a member of YPO, and we can talk some more on that around the work that I'm doing. But it's a wonderful organization that I try and give into as much as I possibly can, as I've got so much value and kindness back out of that that business network.
Yeah. So obviously what you're doing now is nothing like photography. Well, maybe it is. It includes photography, but I was really drawn to you by what your mission is and how you're using your time to get back to that whole idea of, taking care of animals and the wildlife and wilderness. So tell us about Journeys with Purpose.
Okay, I will do. I'm just going to slightly preface it with saying that I always had that tug and that burn inside through my 20s and through my 30s to go back to my roots around the environment and sustainability in the natural world. So I exited that business about 12 or so years ago now. And I've been involved in environmental sustainability work ever since. And most particularly in recent years, the past 6-7 years, around this theme of rewilding and ecosystem restoration. So to quickly then move on to sort of where I got to with Journeys with Purpose, I thought, how can I make my best contribution? How can I create advocacy for the things that I believe in and influence in the things that I believe in?
So you said the word rewilding. What does that mean to you? Because I want to make sure we're all hearing it the same way that you mean it.
So rewilding is about in its strictest term, and that's sort of fairly broad because it has different meanings and it's quite loose. But in a term that many people use, it's about large scale restoration of landscapes and wildlife secured over the long term for the benefit of the biodiversity, the wildlife, and rural communities that can sustain themselves, both from an ecosystem perspective and a biodiversity perspective, but also create economic vitality within those systems as well. And even within that, there can be a very broad spectrum from raw wilderness with few people in the landscapes to more actively engaged communities within landscapes. But I hope that gives you a little bit more of a sort of term that we can work with. And I'm going to give you some examples as we go through this that sort of bring it more to life, if you like, and reality with people.
Yeah. So tell us about Journeys with Purpose.
Okay, so I set up Journeys with Purpose in 2019 to really dovetail in two of my great loves. That is the natural world, and also how we can engage and experience the natural world through travel. And so I'm a real believer in experiential and emotive learning. I think we can go so far with our rational engagement about how we use our heads to understand themes and matters of importance and so on. But we also need to re-engage our hearts as well. And that to me comes through these travel and direct engagement experiences. And so that was really the birth of Journeys with Purpose, was a vehicle with which I could create experiences in the wild with these great conservation leaders and their teams around the world, across the 7 continents, the Americas, Europe, Africa, Asia, Australasia, and then climate science in the poles and Antarctica. And
but
so,
you're not just creating these experiences for yourself, right? So tell us.
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
So again, I'm going to give some examples shortly of what we do. But if we think about that, about experiences in the wild, with the very highest echelons of conservation leaders around the world, and in turn, the audience that we want to bring into the wild are what I call people who can help pull big levers. And so our audience is either being able to pull those levers through financial means, and that could be through philanthropy or impact investments, or through some other form of advocacy, influence, powerful voice. They could be C-suite executives, politicians, sport, media, and so on and so forth.
So people of influence, right?
Yeah, exactly. People who can bring to bear significant influence and means, either through financial means or through reaching audiences, powerful voices that can reach deep into broad audiences. So
what are these experiences that you create for them?
Okay, so one of the early stories that I heard and I learned and I think really is the gold standard is the work of Chris and Doug Tompkins in South America. Now, Doug sadly passed away about 9 years or so ago now, but he had been he was brought up in California. Chris is Californian as well, and he was a very successful entrepreneur, the founder of North Face clothing, and with his first wife, the founder of Esprit, hugely successful retail enterprise in the States, particularly in the 1980s. And so he's a very successful entrepreneur growing up in San Francisco. But he was also an outdoorsman. He was a climber. He was a canoer. He was a professional skier. And so that by association, he had friends like Yvon Chouinard of Patagonia. And he was tracking what he was doing in his commercial career with what he was seeing change in the natural environment that he was experiencing as an outdoor person, a climber, and so on and so forth. And so he became quite disillusioned with what he was doing, sold his businesses in the late 80s, early 90s. And with his second wife, Chris, who had been the CEO of Patagonia for 20 years, they moved to South America, to Chile and Argentina, Chile first. And they started buying land. And I'll quickly scale forward from the early 90s when they began to where we are now, 30 years later. And within Chile and Argentina, they have created and enlarged new national parks of 15 million acres terrestrially and 30 million acres of marine reserves. And this is just an incredible story about how they've managed to leverage money and also the support of provincial and national government in those two countries to do large-scale ecosystem restoration, rewilding, the rehabilitation of exploited species, and also rural communities and livelihoods. So actually bringing money and economics back into rural environments and keeping people in those environments. And so what we do is the experience that we have is to one of the parks that they created with the support of local people in northeastern Argentina called Iberá. And this is the story about the creation of a national park of 2 million acres and the reintroduction of species, and most particularly the reintroduction of the jaguar after a 70 years absence. And they now have, over the past 2 years or so, successfully reintroduced jaguars, where there are probably almost 20 jaguars in this park now. And it very much mirrors the story of the reintroduction of wolves into Yellowstone.
Wolves into Yellowstone. I was
That's
just
it.
thinking that.
Yeah. And so you get, and so the
What changes
experience is
the whole ecology and the whole food chain and everything that, it certainly did in Yellowstone. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, there is the famous YouTube video with George Monbiot, and it says how wolves change the course of rivers, which has been, watched 40, 50 million times. Yeah. And it's absolutely brilliant how, when you put functioning ecosystems back into place, how you can create thriving biodiversity. And we'll come on to why all this is important, and create economic vitality in communities as well. So that is one of the experiences that we have. We have a journey departing this September. So if people are interested in coming on that, they should check in at our website, journeyswithpurpose.org, and see what the experience is like to travel to Argentina. So that's one example. We also work with an organization.
Let me stop you just for a second. When they go on one of your journeys, what is the experience like for them? What are they seeing and where are they going?
So taking Argentina as an example, what we will do is we will travel with the local conservation team. So the local partner that we travel with is Fundación Rewilding Argentina, which is really the legacy of the work of Tompkins Conservation. And so we will be with the team leaders and the country director, and we'll be learning from them the story of how they created this national park. And we will be doing a journey through a landscape, walking, driving, but also small flight travel as well, to understand how this came about and all of the different biomes and areas within the park. And we'll also visit the wildlife as well. We go and visit the jaguar enclosures. So there's quarantine centers where they bring jaguars in that have been injured, perhaps in road accidents in Brazil or somewhere like that. They bring them into the quarantine center, then they go into the main enclosure within the park, and then they're released into the wild. So there's all these different processes. So it's very much, as I said earlier, a story across a period of a week of how this came about. I should also say, Nancy, what's really important to us is that, particularly with the audience that we're serving, is that we have lots of service and comfort and so on, and we also have a lot of fun. It's like learning on the hoof without realizing you're really learning at the time, because it's all in dialogue, it's all in conversation, and it's all very easy, but it's run at a pretty fast tempo.
So do they want to go on these trips because they're interested in the environment and rewilding and that, or is it like, other people just travel to see things?
No, it's generally self-selecting, but within that there's a very broad range. So I think there's an increasing number of people, particularly young people and next generation, who have a curiosity, an interest in the natural world, who want to engage, but they're not quite sure where to start. So where do I begin on this journey? There are thousands of organizations out there that are doing great work, but where do I start? Where do I begin to get orientation to? So, there is within that, there's even, a broad spectrum. Some people who are, have a good understanding, but it's really helping people navigate as to where they can start. Do they want to start with supporting the organization, the foundation that we visit anywhere in the world? Or is this, part of information that they can then take and they can then begin their own work in impact, whether it's through philanthropy, whether it's through impact investments, whether it's through some other form of advocacy or influence.
Oh, great. So you told us about going to Patagonia, which is Chile and Argentina. Where else do you take your visitors?
Okay, so we also have a couple of principal partners in North America. One is American Prairie Reserve in northern Montana, who are working on a project to rewild over 3 million acres of the American prairies. and they are working with local people, with local landowners to achieve that. And that's really, again, a remarkable story of bringing the prairies back to life, and some of the large megafauna as well, like bison and so on.
Oh, wow.
And we also
Yeah.
work with the Turner properties and ranches, of which there are several in North America. I think the Turner family now is US's second largest landowner. So that's a couple of examples in North America. In Europe, we work with partners in Scotland, which is really pushing the envelope on wanting to be the world's first rewilding nation and bringing nature back into our lives in Scotland. And then we have a principal partner in Romania, in Central Europe, which is around looking at how they can create the Yellowstone of Europe, Europe's largest forested national park, over 600,000 acres. And this is a fascinating area for us as Europeans, having, there the largest densities and the populations of wolves, of lynx, of bears, and so on.
Oh, wow.
And so
Yeah.
keeping that intact. And this is a foundation that's supported by significant resources and people. For example, if we include Hans-Jörg Wyss at the Wyss Foundation, Anders Poulsen, who does a lot of conservation work in Scotland and other parts of the world. We then also work with partners in Africa, in East Africa and Southern Africa. We have just had a journey come back from Kenya with an impact partner called Daughters for Earth. And Daughters for Earth was founded by two remarkable ladies, Zainab Salbi, and also Jodie Allen, Paul Allen's sister. So this is around female empowerment, female leadership, particularly as it relates to community welfare and environmental protection as well. And so our group of guests in Kenya had this remarkable journey across different areas of Kenya, understanding landscapes, biomes, and also speaking with women. And it was a women-only trip, led by women, for women. And so I didn't go on it. It was led by
I guess not.
No, it was led by one of our female team members, Venetia. So that was a great success. We are doing a trip to South Africa this year as well. And then other project partners, we have trips running this year to Sri Lanka in Asia. We are looking at how we can develop an Australian experience and then also polar experiences as well, both in the North Pole, the Arctic, and also Antarctica as well. And then, I mean, these are kind of flagship experiences.
Yeah.
So these are set departures that people join, but we also do a lot of tailor-made travel as well. So these experiences can be and are bought out by private groups, and we also then hand make private trips to, for example, Costa Rica, Colombia, wherever it may be in the world, India, and so on and so forth. But it's always this underlying theme of our connection to the natural world and how we can help contribute towards its restoration and preservation.
So I'm curious, you've been doing this for a while, and obviously you've traveled the world for a long time. What changes have you seen in our environment, especially as our climate changes and the weather? It's, it's frankly weird now.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, how is that impacting those wildlife areas? Is it possible to redevelop the prairies in Montana if our climate is changing so much?
We can become more climate resilient through stronger and more biodiverse ecosystems, natural ecosystems. So, the answer I'm going to give is within the context of how I take climate change science on board. And I appreciate that, there is a broad set of beliefs as to whether even climate change is occurring or not.
Yes, true.
But I'm approaching the answer as I take the science, and I believe that our climate is changing based on human activity. So I think I'll begin with a phrase that I heard some time ago that I think is a good way of sort of framing this overall. So the two principal reasons for our climate change are, number one, our emissions into the atmosphere from private travel, commercial traffic, and so on and so forth. Obviously, the gas is going to the atmosphere. Mm-hmm. The second reason is how we produce and distribute food, how we manage our land, which is You know, we obviously are farming on huge scales now,
Yes.
both for livestock and arable. And it's arable for us, but it's also arable on crops for how we feed our livestock, which we in turn consume. And that is having a devastating consequence on natural ecosystems and forests. We know that we are taking out natural ecosystems and forests in order to turn that land over to farming land. And the best summary that I've heard is that we are basically continuing to arm our enemy by our emissions into the atmosphere, whilst at the same time disabling our defenses. And disabling our defenses, I mean by that is we are taking away our natural living systems that enable us to absorb carbon, both terrestrially and in the oceans, and also emit oxygen into the atmosphere as well. So in a very simple term, this is what we're doing. And this is why we're getting to the point of, you know, why is what I do or other people doing conservation important? Why is rewilding at large scale important? Is because it's helping maintain our life systems. It's creating ecosystems that are resilient against disease. They've got diversity in them, rather than the monocropping of farming. And also it's our vast sinks of being able to sequester carbon and emit oxygen as well. So that's the most sort of simple way I can put it. I hope that sort of
No,
makes,
it's great. I mean,
sense.
have you seen changes in the last 10 years that have affected
So
the efforts that you're making?
It's difficult to say. I've seen changes in the last 10 years myself. You know, I do watch the temperature gauges on the sort of global scale, and we've seen temperatures go up year after year. I think it's more over my lifetime. So I was born in 1970, and 1970 is often used as a baseline. You know, we were degrading our natural world up to 1970, but it's really accelerated from there. And I do see it. I think it's around increased population pressures on land to live on, and also land for use in the growing food and livestock and so on, which is increasingly encroaching into wilderness areas and natural habitats. We've seen declining populations of wildlife correspondingly, and it's also how society is organized in a very consumptive way. So we have obviously much more pollution and waste in our atmosphere, and on our land and our seas. So yes, I have seen this, physically seen it as I travel around the world. And in the round, we talk about climate change, but in the round, you know, we are obviously continuing to warm our climate. And warming our climate has effects on our ocean currents and our weather systems, and overall more precipitation. That's very uneven, but that's what will happen.
Yeah. Well, I think this particular year with an El Nino, and I have a sister who lives in Minneapolis, Minnesota, it starts snowing in September and ends in maybe May, right? They had one snow this year, and it was never that their lakes didn't freeze over. You know, they always have ice fishing everywhere around Minnesota. No ice fishing because the lakes didn't freeze over. So people who don't think the climate has changed, and I think maybe are convinced now that things are changing, and whether it's a natural cycle or it's all human induced, there's that debate, as you said. But I really love it that someone like you is putting your everything into making our earth sustainable, not just for people, but for, you know, protecting these wildlife sanctuaries and rewilding areas so that it can balance out that, not just the ecosystem in those areas, but just bring some kind of balance back to the earth.
That's a great way of putting it, is bringing balance back to the earth, back to our lives.
Yeah.
And ultimately the earth will be fine, because, you know, it depends what timelines we're talking about.
Right.
If we're talking about 500,000 years, the earth will be fine.
Yeah.
If we're talking about 50 years,
we don't know.
We're on a path where it looks like we're storing up some trouble here.
Well, I know, and you live on an island. So
well, that's it. We all live,
and a lot of people do.
We all live on an island.
Yeah.
It's the pale blue marble in the middle of the universe.
Well, I
And
gotta tell you though, my husband and I have more than once said to each other, "I'm glad I live smack dab in the middle of the United States," because it's, things are definitely the water levels are rising. And
yeah, it's
but
and
back
it's
to
and
what I
it's
was telling you about my husband. So he does a lot of uh, cold weather, you know, photography, and so um, oh my gosh, there's this place that's right near the North Pole off of Finland, and I can't think of the name of it. Anyway, they take a sailing ship, like with the big
mm,
masts and stuff, and sailed up there and went from iceberg to photograph polar bears and
yeah,
the landscape. And the icebergs were calving a lot.
yeah,
I mean, and that's a sign of melt and
mm,
such.
mm.
So um, yeah,
Yeah, it is. I think probably the area you're talking about is Svalbard.
Svalbard, that's it.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, which is one of the iconic locations for polar bears around the
yeah,
world. I was lucky enough to be in Churchill in Canada last year, seeing
yeah.
polar bears, and it is a remarkable
Those are
experience.
big
So,
beasts. Yeah,
I mean, I think we're talking about concerns about how we what the outlook is. What I do know is that that's a difficult conversation we can all have, you and I, and with other people. What I'm a firm believer in is talking about the success stories, because there is a way that we
yes,
can, and that's what we do is showcase successes, and across large scales of millions of acres, and so we can change course. And I see people working on this, and this is absolutely brilliant. And it's not just about the endeavor and changing course on how we manage and our relationship with the land, but it's also just the joy and the pleasure and the fulfillment it gives people. It's
yeah.
just wonderful, and we have so much fun.
Oh,
So there is a way of we all want fulfillment and meaning and purpose in our life. And
right.
I think when you're doing it for things that you really love, and you give over yourself or part of yourself to something other than yourself, that's real joy
That's
and
really
meaning.
satisfaction. It
It
is.
is, it is. And I think if I can sort of impart some message here, that is part of it. A strong part of it is find that meaning and that purpose, and it is about giving over yourself or part of yourself to something other than yourself,
Yeah,
and that's just so rewarding.
yeah,
So that's what I do, and I I'm what we are doing in terms of coming back to how we can influence and impart information and knowledge to others, is looking at how we, Journeys of Purpose, can build a community. So on the theme of influencing, is at the heart of what we do is about building a community who, through the experiences, the travel experience they have with us, can understand better how they can contribute to positive action on the ground and in the seas.
mhm,
And so, I'm beginning to see this now. Journeys of Purpose is still a young enterprise, but I'm beginning to see this. People traveling with us again, people getting involved in impact, and it can be impact investments. It's not just about giving away. It's always about an investment on some level. And so that's what we're really at the heart of what we do. I should also add as well is that we really work to put strong foundations into the company.
mhm.
So it is a commercial company. I'm a believer in the Patagonia model about being being a business and doing well. So we are B Corp certified. So we're Benefit Corporation certification, and we're the world's highest scoring travel company as a B Corp.
Really?
Yeah, and I was surprised at that
Congratulations.
myself.
Wow. I mean, that's a huge feather in your cap.
Well, it is. I'm really proud of it. I'm really proud of the team behind that makes all this happen
Yeah.
at Journeys with Purpose. So I think part of that is because, yes, we're engaged in travel, but we're really an impact business. At the
Mhm.
heart of what we do, we're
Yeah.
travel as our medium. So we have that. We are members of something called 1% for the Planet. So 1% of our revenues goes to good causes and foundations. We have, I think I shared it with you recently, Nancy. We've recently won an award with Travel and Leisure magazine in the States, Global Vision Award for the impact work that we're doing in the field with conservation. So we're really trying to make sure we put strong foundations, strong roots into the organization, and also then make sure we communicate that to the right audience that we want to be traveling with us.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to tell us about Journeys with Purpose? Any success stories or any other tidbits that might entice our listeners to get into contact with you?
It's really about people. It's about people first and foremost. I mean, a couple of comments I've had is, so Duncan, do you run wildlife holidays? And it kind of drives me crazy. I say, no, we don't run wildlife holidays. We're going to see some spectacular wildlife, but it's people at the heart of what we do, in terms of the people that take care of us and guide us through these journeys and who make the magic happen. So we have this term we call remarkable people, projects and places, all with remarkable purpose. So it's really around thinking about that mantra. We are also strong advocates and supporters of female diversity and youth leadership and representation, both in the causes that we support, but also a guest profile as well. You know, we want women engaging with us. We had this Daughters for Earth journey in Kenya. It was a female-only journey. We want diversity. We want young people traveling with us. And I think that's another big thing that I see with family offices and philanthropy, is next gen really want to get engaged with the environmental issues. So that's a really strong theme that we want to focus on. So I think, the sum up of the message is that we have, huge challenges ahead of us that are solvable. And so it's a case of get engaged, because there are doors out there that are just so wonderful to walk through and get engaged with and get stuck into.
Well, I like that idea of solutions, because so often we just, here's this problem and here's this, and it's like everything just is piled on us that we feel like we can't solve anything. But you're like, here's a step to start making a difference and to use your influence to create a greater, earth and world and living environment for everything that lives on the earth, which is everything that we know of. So
I can't emphasize this enough, is focus on successes, helping amplify successes and positive solutions. And we have the greatest technology out there, which is nature, to help us with climate change and so on, and the joy and the wonder that one can experience through working with nature and the natural world and the communities that live in them, and supporting community successes. So it's not about helicoptering in and telling local people what to do. It's about understanding what their successes are and helping to amplify their successes.
That's awesome.
And supporting them. So and that's what makes it a lot more fun as well. Focusing on solutions and successes.
So I love everything that you're doing, and I love everything that you've told us. But to wrap it up, I want to ask you a few rapid fire questions to help the audience get to know you in a different way. So are you ready?
Go for it.
Okay. Cat or dog?
Dog.
Dog. Okay. Coffee or tea? You're British.
Coffee. I'm going to say coffee.
No kidding. I've never heard that from a Brit. That is so funny. Okay. Summer or winter?
Summer.
Summer. Netflix or movie theater?
Oh gosh, that's a tough one. Movie theater.
Movie theater. Okay. Would you rather have a casual night in or a fancy night out?
Casual night in.
Window or aisle seat?
Window, always.
Okay. Morning person or night owl?
Morning.
Yep. Okay, so tell us, what is something that you cannot do?
Oh golly, I can't fly planes. I'd love to fly planes. I hate flying commercial, but I love being in a small seat or a two-seater.
Aircraft. Yeah. I like it because you don't have to go through airport security when you fly on a private plane.
There are so many reasons to love small flight travel.
So Duncan, where can our audience find you if they want to connect and learn more?
Okay, so go to journeyswithpurpose.com. and
.org.
explore the website there. It's easy to contact me and the team from there, and we'd be happy to show you around the projects and the people that we work with. And yeah, that's the very best place to start. We have lots of social media and comms as well, but the best place to start is with the website and how you can contact us through there.
All right, journeyswithpurpose.org. So thank you again for your time, Duncan, and to our audience for your attention. If you or someone you know wants to write a book, you can find my contact information in my LinkedIn profile. And there's a link to schedule a strategy session with me. You have been watching Masters of Influence with Nancy Erickson. See you next time.